Welcome to Celtic Medicine Stories, a podcast where we explore stories from the old Celtic lands, with the understanding that they carry medicine for us. I'm your host, Kat Horton, and I offer these stories in the spirit of the oral storytelling tradition of the British Isles. That is, they are free and they're open to everyone, always. Although these stories often have come from another time and have evolved through time with the oral storytelling tradition, they are here still for a reason. If you're curious about going deeper with the story, with the images, symbols, characters, landscapes, sounds, whatever it is that's speaking to you from this particular story, then there are some free resources below which will help guide you in that process. This is the third and final part of this telling of Merlin's story. This is the part you may be more familiar with and has taken many different forms over the years as the story travelled around Britain between the north and what is now Wales. This part of the story speaks of Merlin as a great prophet, implying that he's found some opening to the other world through which knowledge, unbound by time and space, comes through him. You may recognise a parallel here with the Thomas the Rhymer story from episode 1. The gift of prophecy is a common theme in the tradition of the Britons. In both these stories, it's time out alone in the natural world that precipitates the coming of the prophetic ability. In other old Welsh poems, Merlin is in conversation with an apple tree and a pig, suggesting his animistic worldview and respect for intelligences beyond the human. I'd love to know what you hear in this part of Merlin's tale. So as you listen to this story, as with all these Celtic medicine stories, let yourself float. You don't need to pay attention in the way maybe you were asked to do in school. You don't need to try and follow the plot line or the dialogue or anything in particular. In fact, the medicine lies in what you find yourself attending to. So when you let yourself go into that receptive, floaty state and you find your mind wanting to savor an image or a sound or a word, and you find yourself more engaged with that than whatever it is that I'm saying, then notice that. You don't need to analyze it or try and figure it out in that moment, but just notice it, that called your attention, because that's where the medicine lies. Wherever this story interacts with your story is what you're looking for. And I believe this is part of why these stories have been around for so long, is because they each interact with us in some special way. And so as you listen, just let yourself absorb it and notice which parts stick out to you. And now suddenly he's ravenous. Hasn't eaten for 3 days and 3 nights. And he knows where the food is because he's been wandering for 3 days and he saw it. He saw the roots and he saw the greens and he saw the apples and the hazelnuts and the berries. He knows where it is. And so he goes off gathering food. And he even saw a cave, it was shown to him, where he can sleep. He can set up a fire and he can live. And this is what he does for years. For years, he lives in the Wildwood, a wild man drinking the spring water, eating the leaves and the berries and the nuts with his wolf. And from time to time, people wander by and he bumps into them. And he'll tell them prophecies. He sees things about their lives and he tells them, and they turn out to be true. And they tell their friends and neighbors, and people are now in the wood wandering around looking for him, wanting to see this great seer of the Wildwood to get some wisdom from him. One day, he decides to climb up to the top of the fell, to that spot where he had that moment of realizing his choice. And he's laying up there. It's like mid-afternoon, the sun's out. It's pretty rare. So he's enjoying it, taking it in. And he hears this sweet music. Oh, this sounds like human music. This isn't the otherworld music that he sometimes hears. This sounds like human music. It's curious. Goes away. Next day he goes back to see if he hears this music again. And there it is again. He hears that music. As he turned in the direction of the music, he hears someone scampering away. He goes to look where they were, And lying on the edge of the forest, the edge of the wood up onto the moor, there is a bundle. He picks it up. It's a grey woolen cloak. He opens it up. Not just any cloak. This he gave to his nephew just last winter. It was a gift from him to his nephew. This can only have been sent to him by his sister. He knows that. He puts the cloak on, even though it's warm. And the next day he goes back again, wondering what will happen this time. And again, the music. And he says, "Speak, speak, show yourself. Who are you?" And a nervous voice comes from the forest. "Your sister sent me. Your sister sent me. She worries about you. She wants you to come. She wants you to come to the court. King Rudrick has sworn he will not harm you because they've heard of your prophecies. You have become quite famous. They've heard of you, and your sister wants to see you, and the king wonders if maybe you can give him some prophecies. Will you come? Will you come? Will you come?" He considers it for a moment, and he feels his heart breaking for his sister, for the grief that she must be feeling at losing her son and losing him. He says, "Yes, tell her I will come. Tell her I will come." And so, good to his word, the next day he trots off, him and the wolf, down the hill. It's quite a trek. It takes him most of the day. And he comes to a village. That was a town, really. It's a pretty big settlement outside of Rudrick's court. It hadn't even occurred to him to think about what he looked like. There's moss in his hair and sticks in his beard, and his clothes are raggedy and dirty, and he probably stinks. He can't smell himself anymore. His beard's full of stuff, and he's dirty. Didn't even think about it. But as he walks through the village, he hears them whispering, sniggering. "Myrddin! Myrddin!" they whisper. The mad one. The mad one. Myrddin, they call him, and they start to get bolder. They yell at him, "Myrddin! Ha!" They laugh as he walks through the streets. Oh, he thinks, probably should have done something about the hair. He minds not. He winds his way to the court, and they let him in. They bring him into the hall. The king and the queen are there. And his sister brightens up as she sees him, and she's delighted to see him. The king kind of scowls at him. And his sister says, "I'm so glad you're here. Welcome, welcome, my luck, and wonderful, wonderful to see you." And he looks at her. She's got a leaf sticking out of her hair. And he points, he's like, "What is that?" And the king turns to the queen. He says, "Yeah, you have a leaf in your hair. What's this?" And he says, "Oh, my lord, I heard you wanted a prophecy. Well, I'll tell you something. The leaf you just pulled out of your wife, my sister's hair, came from that plum tree she was rolling around below not a couple of hours ago with her lover." The court gasped. His sister scowled at him. "Oh, yes, my lord, I can tell you more if you like." And his sister turns to the king and says, "He's obviously lost his mind, my lord. Clearly he's been out there too long. Completely lost his mind. Look at him. Look at him. What a state. I'll prove to you that this is total rubbish that he's speaking. Bring me a lad. Bring me a lad from the kitchen. I'll show you." So they scurry to bring a lad from the kitchen. And she says to him, "Come on and tell me, oh wise brother, tell me how this one is going to die. This lad's going to die." He looks at him and says, "Oh, well, that's simple. He's going to be stabbed." "Okay, thank you very much." So she sends the lad back to the kitchen. She whispers to the staff there, and she says, "Dress him up as a girl, send him back in." So they do that. They come back in, and she says, "Now, come on, wise brother, tell me how this one is going to die." And he says, "Well, whether boy or girl, I'm not sure, but this one's going to die from hanging." And the king looks suspicious now. He knows it's the same person. 2 different deaths for the same person. "Come on." The sister, emboldened, sends the lad back, changes the costume, brings him back. "What about this one? How's this one going to die?" "Oh, Simple. Can we stop with these games now? This one's going to die from drowning. Can we stop now, please? His sister, looking pleased, turns to the king, who says, oh, yes, okay, clearly lost his marbles. Nothing to worry about here. They send the lad back to the kitchen. So the sister pleads on his behalf. Clearly, my lord, my brother has lost it. He's gone mad. But look at him. What a state. We cannot send him back looking like this. Please let me bring him into to our home. We'll feed him. We'll clean him up. We'll get him ready. And the king agrees. He sees no harm in this old, ragged man who seems to have no powers left anymore. And so he stays at the court for some days, maybe some weeks, eats good food, gets warm and tidied up a little bit, spends time with his sister, who's still pretty mad at him, but is so glad to see him that she's able to let go of that betrayal, knowing the truth of what he spoke. She begs him to stay, and he can't do it. He says, sister dear, I love you. I love being with you. I cannot stand being around all these people. I see it all. I see everything. I see the lies. I see the masks. I see the betrayal. I see the pretense. I can't do it. I need to go back to the trees, to the wolf, to the deer, to the blackbirds, to the apples and the hawthorns, where life is just what it is. Life. She begs some more. Nope, I won't stay. But if you would like to ease my life a little for the winters, you could build me a shelter out there. Use some of these men here to build me a shelter so that I have a warm place in the winter. But make sure there are many, many, many big windows so that I can see the stars as I lay in. And she agrees. So he heads back into the woods. And a few people visit him, not many. But over time, that changes because that young lad that they pulled out of the kitchen, he grows till he's a young man. He's a fine young man. He's training to be a warrior. And one day he's out on the land riding his horse with some friends. And he takes his horse down a bank and miscalculated how steep it is. And the horse stumbled and threw him. And this young lad was stabbed on a branch of a tree. And he hung as he fell. He hung from his clothes on another branch, and his head dipped in the river. He drowned. He was stabbed, he fell, and he drowned. He died in 3 different ways. And when news of this spread, that he had been right, that this prophecy from years ago was right, people knew that he was a true seer. And so they started going more and more, finding his camp in the woods. News spread. And then go and sit by his fire and ask him for stories and ask him to tell the future and ask him for songs and poems. And other great bards traveled to be with him. It said Taliesin also came to sit with him, and his sister would visit. And he would tell the old stories and sing the old songs. And it was open. You could go. Anybody could go. You could find your way up the trail and find your way to sit at his fire. But if you go around dawn, you won't find him there. Because every day before dawn, he would find his way back to that spring, that same spring. And he'd wait for the sun. And as it started to crest above the eastern ridge, he'd take a handful of water. And he'd look at the sun. And he'd say, I choose life. Thank you for listening to this episode of Celtic Medicine Stories. If you want to go deeper, check out my Working with Archetypes free email course. There's a link somewhere in these notes. You'll find it. And feel free to visit on my website, kathoughton.com, KATHOUGHTON.com. I'd love to hear from you. Go well.